I was like, there's a thing. Welcome to a very special Nerds and Friends. If you haven't seen our Ghost podcast that we put out recently, the link will be in an upper corner of your screen, probably. But
over here, maybe it's over here.
Maybe it's over there.
Definitely
I don't know.
Down there.
This corner, right?
Just remember to
editor, put the link
here. Just make sure to also like smash that subscribe button, which should be like right here.
Yeah.
I think, yes.
And reset
Likely
your notifications, which are down here.
It is almost certainly going to be below this video.
Almost certainly. Well,
Actually,
YouTube's going to roll out an update day we put this video out. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. And instead, it's going to be like just hovering like dead center in the middle of that for our cameras.
I mean, considering the unskippable ads, it sounds about right.
For those of you who don't know, a little inside baseball here at Nerds and Friends Studios, Josh does the editing for these, so the rest of us who are on the podcast have no idea which corner we're going to be in at any point in time.
It's true.
Oh, absolutely. Or if we're all going to be on the screen at the same time.
Yeah, because I go with whatever Zoom gives me. I guess I could go through the steps of rearranging us, but it would be a lot of work, so I'm not going to.
That sounds truly and utterly awful.
Yes. So
I think there's a way I could do it smart, but I'm not that good at video editing yet, so.
We'll work on it. Well, what we should do is we should get to the point where we all have VTuber avatars. So this is actually more like a morning zoo, but with weird VTuber avatars.
Hook us up, Will.
I
want to be an owl. I want to be an owl or a cat. An owl or a cat.
It could literally be the morning zoo. So if you're going to be an owl or a cat, you do need to have that. We need to bring back the General Zukov thing. So you need to have like the red star, specifically because I can't unthink of that man as I can't not think of General Zukov as fucking Lucius Malfoy anymore.
Jason Isaacs. That's
Jason Isaacs. I literally can't think of him not as Jason Isaacs because of the movie The Death of Stalin. And
I need to see that because I've not seen it, and I hear it's fantastic.
He is the standout. He is one of the single greatest characters ever.
For everyone who's listening and is very confused by why we're bringing up General Zukov, the unfortunate history there is that I was in a rap group that I'm not going to name, so you can't Google it. And my rapper name was General Zukov. And
it was actually Boys to Men.
Yes, we released 2 albums, and we were not very good. But I think I was one of the better of us, but we weren't very good overall. So
you know what? Neither was John Cena at first. And look at him now.
Well, thank you for that high praise.
I mean, and here's where we run into the problem with Josh editing these things is we can't just call out to the editor to put a link somewhere on the screen because Josh just won't do it.
Because Josh just doesn't know how. I figured out with YouTube how to put like there's the end things which I always put on, which is not done through the video editor, it's done through the YouTube upload portal, where I can put like a link to a playlist or a specific video or a related video, so I do that on all our videos. But then during it, I know how to put a link to one video that'll just be in the top right corner for the duration of the video. But to have like a link pop up as we're talking and then go away when we move on, I have not figured that out yet. So
yeah, the other problem is that he controls the audio. So if I do just drop the name of the band, he's just going to bleep this out. So
let's just get it out. It's the 719 Crew is the name of our band. And feel free to let us know in the comments how terrible we were. It was a long time ago. I wish I could say we were in high school, but we were in college, so it's extra embarrassing.
You put out the effort to record anything. Like you literally got farther than most people who think I'm going to go be part of a rap group. So,
and I mean,
let alone like count your successes.
Yeah, true. And honestly, you got 2 albums recorded in the early like 2010s, and that was before like a lot of the infrastructure that we have now in the 2020s was widely available.
It's true.
Yeah, you would have actually been a SoundCloud rapper.
We would have been, yeah. We had some precursor to SoundCloud. I'm drawing a blank on the software now, but the Nerds and Friends friend Caleb Whittle, who's also in the band. I'm sure he's not gonna like me saying that. He was the one who found our. He was in whatever at the time was the underground aspiring rap scene. He was the most plugged in for us. So he did a contest for Hobson, who's actually very successful now as a rapper. And so we were in communication with him and his team for a little while. So I think I'm still friends with his manager on Facebook, his ex-manager. I'm like, all right, cool. So anyway, digression.
So transitioning from the ghost of your former career to an actual ghost.
That was the best pivot we have ever done. Well done, Carey.
That is a beautiful
10 out of 10. 10 out of 10.
Dr. Segway is my name.
So yeah, so anybody who listened to that episode, link in the thing in the whichever corner.
The Nerds and Friends Ghost Story special, the first of many to come. But yes, continue.
Yes. Would have heard my experience that happened right around and in Cheesman Park. And so tonight I'm going to take you through a little bit of Denver history that is absolutely sounds fake. Let's large swaths of this sound completely fake.
Well, this is extra exciting now.
A lot of this you would assume is going to be a terrible backstory in like a 1980s horror movie, and in fact there is one. It's called Changeling. That is based on events that I.
What was Scarlett Johansson?
What
the movie Changeling? Isn't it? Hang on, I'm looking it up now. You're good.
There's a Changeling with
you're thinking of the
Jolie.
ones that was in like the mid 2000s with Jennifer not Jennifer Lopez.
No, Carrie's right. Angelina Jolie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, not that Changeling.
I was gonna say that's set in LA. It says.
Yeah, no, the horror movie that was actually in the movie.
With George C. Scott from 1980.
That's the one. Yeah, that is based on events that did happen around Cheesman Park as well. The movie itself, I think, takes place in like Seattle or whatever.
That is exactly what I'm reading right now. You are correct.
Yeah, but the movie, like the stories that the movie is based around, from right here in Colorado.
It's directed by Martin Scorsese.
It's really a Scorsese film.
Is it?
That is what the IMDb is telling. No. Wait, it's okay. I read the trivia wrong. No.
Produced by?
No, Peter Medak is the director. I don't know why the trivia says director Martin Scorsese. Nope, I misread. I was reading too quick and I misled everyone in our audience. Internet, come at me. Anyway, move on. Sorry.
Another curse of Cheesman Park.
Yes. Oh, it's happening.
Yeah, and it has been reported apparently more than once. I've come across this. Of people saying that Poltergeist was also based on Cheesman Park. I cannot confirm this. The story that inspired Poltergeist took place in New York, although there is some people that have said in a lot of different reports that it is also based around events around Cheesman Park. I can't confirm any of that. As far as I can tell, it may not be true, but.
Wow. But no, dude, what I'm seeing on IMDb is they're saying, this is based on real life events that took place at a mansion located on East 13th Avenue, Cheesman Park in Denver, Colorado. So,
all right,
if IMDb says it can't be wrong. So, but no, dude, this is exciting. Right. Continue with your presentation.
Yeah, Poltergeist may or may not have also been inspired by it. I can't confirm that, but Changeling, the 1980s Changeling, certainly was. So our story goes way back into the past, into the first half of the 1800s. So the land that is now Cheesman Park, and I mean most of Denver, honestly, was land that was part of the that belonged to the Arapaho people. In the late 1850s, General William Larimer decided...
Larimer County is named after, right?
Laramie. I think, is it Larimer or Laramie?
But no, Larimer County is north of Denver, where Fort Collins is, and then Laramie is the town in Wyoming, not farther.
Yeah, Larimer. Yeah, so Larimer County, Larimer Street, all named after William Larimer.
Wow.
And he decided that he was going to build, like, he wanted to expand Denver into, which was getting a whole lot of settlers due to the gold rush of the 1850s. And so they needed to put in a cemetery there. And so General Larimer decided in late 1850s that he wanted to have a respectable cemetery there for the growing city of Denver. There is a story that is not true about the first person buried in what would become the Mount Prospect and later the Denver City Cemetery, that there was a convicted murderer who was hung and then buried there. That story is not true. The first man died of a lung infection and was buried in the cemetery. The second man was a convicted murderer who was hung and buried with his victim in the same hole.
What?
Yeah.
Why? Okay, I was about to say that's less cinematic, the lung infection thing, but then you hit us with buried in the same hole as his victim, and I was like, okay, I have questions.
Yeah, they were brothers, or I believe they're actually brothers-in-law.
Okay.
It is believed that he had killed his brother-in-law because of a dispute over gold dust. It's not confirmed, mostly because he was a Hungarian immigrant who didn't speak very much English, and he was convicted by a entirely legitimate judicial system, which did not exist in Denver at the time. The nearest courthouse would have been out in Kansas.
Wow.
And so essentially they just put together a bunch of people here in Denver who decided he was guilty and hung him and then threw him in a hole with his brother, who was also a Hungarian immigrant.
That's pretty bleak and fucked up.
Yeah. And so that started this, the old...
And that's how Denver started.
Basically.
Oh, you joke, but I think I've gotten a full rundown of that's how Denver started at by a very long-winded historian once, and this is far more interesting.
Yeah. So, stolen land from native people. It may or may not have been a cemetery for the Arapaho people. It's hard to say because the story...
They didn't document stuff back then, So.
Yeah, even finding documentation that admits that that's what happened is kind of difficult to find.
Right.
Because nobody wants to admit that, it was just land stolen from the Arapaho. I mean, American history.
Yeah, I was about to say, so all of America. Okay.
Yeah. And so, instead of being like a respectable cemetery, it was mostly filled with outlaws, poor people, workers, migrants.
I just want to clarify. So it sounds like General Larimer, who was at the time some sort of martial authority in early fledgling Denver, wanted to make a respectable cemetery for people in Denver, but because it was made by his own, government-funded system, that it ended up just being used by people who couldn't afford a more elite cemetery on probably private estates at that time in history, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and let's be honest, it was at the time it was all prospectors. The Denver was basically just a desert at the foot of the mountains at the time. There wasn't that much in the way of respectable people. And so you have a cemetery, there's tons of outlaws. There was still this was the Old West still.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so there just wasn't that much people with money weren't going to be buried there.
Right. They wouldn't probably be in Denver in the first place unless they were visiting to check on a business prospect. That makes sense. You know?
Mm-hmm. So by the time that, and then I think it was like the 1860s when the federal government decided, you know what, actually, this is federal government land, and we're just going to let you use it as a cemetery anyways.
How gracious of the government.
Yes, and so then the federal government took that totally federal government land that was definitely part of a treaty with the Arapaho Nation and not Native American land, and sold it to the city of Denver to be used as a cemetery, specifically with the
like a caveat.
Yeah, the caveat that it was going to be used as a cemetery and nothing else.
Okay.
Which is quite convenient because considering the price of land and homes right now is actually the method that I'm going to be using to acquire a house. I'm literally just going to walk into a house I like and say, hey, I have a treaty with you and I'm going to actually just sell this to myself. If you don't mind. And when they say I do mind, I'm just going to make sure that they get a little tiny bit of the property just over in the corner. And I'm just going to say, now you stay in there right now and you can govern yourself. And I'll come by.
Technically a sovereign nation, but we're going to economically screw you over every chance we get.
You're a sovereign citizen now, and I might come there to gamble sometime. So just stay.
Exactly.
American history in a nutshell. Well allegorized, well encapsulated.
So Denver kept growing. This not very well upkept cemetery just kept expanding. There were religious groups that had come in. Ended up being a Catholic, Protestant, Chinese cemeteries in this area.
In this area or on that same land? Like, did they kind of split up the land into like almost segregated like graveyard sites?
Of course. This is late 1800s America.
Can't bury a Catholic and a Christian next to each other. That just wouldn't make sense.
Exactly. And so, like, Denver kept expanding. Capitol Hill started expanding. And then people with money started moving in there over the years. By the end of the 1800s, the rich people started complaining that it was just an ugly cemetery, and they wanted a park there instead.
It sounds like, not to do a spoiler, but I feel like this is going to become Cheesman Park.
You're partially right.
Ooh.
And so Colorado and Denver and mostly I think it was Denver's senator at the time, or Colorado, whatever, government person that was able to go over to Congress was lobbying to get the land that had to be used for cemetery allowed to be changed over to a park, which eventually they did, and that became Congress Park in honor of Congress that had allowed the park to then be created.
Now, interestingly enough, as somebody who has studied history, the method of election back in the late 1800s in Colorado, or early 1800s before statehood, actually, was actually you just had to fight a horse. And it actually, like, plenty of people were fighting horses. This was Colorado, but it actually was the first person to fight a horse after the new fiscal year, which moved around, and you didn't know because it was the Old West. So the first person to get a newspaper and then turn around and immediately punch a horse and survive, not without brain damage, that person was actually technically elected king of Colorado. It didn't last long, but it's one of those strange traditions that we hold true to this day.
You know, we joke, but I feel like that might be a slight improvement on our current system of government. Huh?
I mean, honestly, the modern strategy would explain Lauren Boebert.
The modern version is you do have to get run over by a Ford Bronco. They've updated the laws, which again is how we got Lauren Boebert.
Progress.
Yay!
So once, after we got the land converted over so that it could be turned into a park instead of a cemetery, essentially the city of Denver was like, all right, come take out your dead.
Oh, sorry for the big yawn, but may I use that
Yeah.
yawn to punctuate a question? I was about to ask, and you answered. I was going to say, did they just turn it into a park, or did they actually remove and relocate the dead?
No, so first they put out the call so that people would move their family or their
kin, or
or like the people from their church group or whatever.
Right.
And some did. But keep in mind, these are a lot of like outlaws and working class people or poor people.
Get your fucking bodies out of here.
I should also specify, going back a few years, around the, I think it was the 1870s, there was also nearby a hospital opened to deal with the smallpox epidemic that was occurring. And then they kind of just near the hospital turned that into a plotter's field as well.
Convenient, because I figured the hospitals back then didn't have a great success rate. So
yeah, the only thing that hospitals in Colorado did a good job with is tuberculosis. And that's just because if you have tuberculosis, dry air is the best thing for you. And so that's more incidentally related. That's also why Doc Holliday came here.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay.
So
hello, now the big problem was keeping the same person from coming back and just getting multiple bodies, because that man was just ill. He's like, yes, this is my cousin Larry.
We're not even there yet. So
a taste of things to come. Excellent.
You got a plotter's field, you have outlaws, you have criminals, you have homeless people, you have poor people, immigrants who were just here working that died, that didn't have family. And you also have a lot of family that just didn't, like, they had moved here and they just didn't know they had family in the cemetery.
Totally.
And so not very many bodies ended up getting moved that way. And so by the coming up on the end of the beginning of the turn of the 19th century, that's the word, the city of Denver was like, okay, what we're going to do is we're just going to hire a guy to move the bodies. We have the initial plan was to move them over to the Riverside Cemetery, which is still there and is, if I recall, the oldest still in use cemetery in Denver.
Wow.
I've been there, and I actually have a whole nother story about an experience that I had there.
Wow.
But that's for a later date.
That's for next Halloween.
Yeah.
What did you say, Carey? Sorry.
All the ghosts are coming after Will.
Why do ghosts like you more than me? No,
well,
because you want it too much.
Maybe. Or maybe you just need to live in an area of high strangeness for a few years. But
I was there.
I guess LA didn't do it.
we did go to school in Boulder, so
that's fair.
Different kind of high strangeness.
So
my only supernatural potentially story was in Boulder that I told on the Ghost Stories episode. So there you go.
I mean,
there
you go.
Yeah.
But so with that, they hire E.P. McGovern.
Sounds reputable by Old West standards.
Absolutely. He has 2 letters and a last name.
Nice.
Very reputable.
Very reputable.
And so they started this they ended up hiring E.P. McGregor McGovern.
Shout out to Gregor McGregor. We have a friend named Gregor McGregor.
handling water law currently in Boulder County. And
did I tell you, small world, he worked with my dad, because my dad's a civilian attorney for the Army now.
Oh, really?
He was like, "You'll never." He's like, "Get this. There's a guy at work whose actual name is Gregor McGregor," and I was like, "Oh shit! I went to school with him." Like,
his name used to be weirder.
Yeah, it's true.
But yeah, so E.P. McGovern got hired because he was the lowest bidder. And he was by, let's just say, not the most reputable of human beings.
I mean, if you're going to be the lowball bid on a contract to move a bunch of bodies out of a potter's field, I'm making assumptions about you. I'm just saying, you know.
I mean, and it's fair. And so they were going to hire him to move the bodies per coffin. And nobody.
Well, that makes sense. That's just logical.
Nobody knew exactly how many or where all of the bodies were, because there was also a tradition of, if you're digging a grave and you find a body, you just kind of leave it there and you put the new grave on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Looks like a good thought. Looks like a good place for a grave, huh? Somebody thought the same thing.
Exactly.
Well, we already dug the hole. Fuck it.
Yeah. And so, there weren't great records to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And so E.P. McGovern decided, you know what is going to be way more profitable than getting a brand new adult coffin and putting everybody in a coffin? Getting children's coffins and cutting up the bodies.
We're all just like, where's the joke there?
Where's
the joke there?
You said it too fast, but I was literally going to say that as a joke. It's like, you know what the problem with all these bodies is it takes so much wood to put them in a coffin. You know what we should do? We should. No, because it's like
so ridiculous.
No, let's take it like, what's the Phantasm? That's from that real schlock movie Phantasm, where the guy it's the tall man who's literally taking bodies and he's cramming them down, and because he's sending them to like a dimension / planet with higher gravity. It's like, as reanimated, it is bonkers. It's so bad, but like that's a plot. That's basically a plot point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now this historical figure is just the tall man from Phantasm.
And like, you can't make a joke about this because there's like, how do you get worse than this?
Yeah, I mean, we just made a joke about it, and the ghost got Carey, as you can see. So
yeah, I mean,
I'm still listening. I just need
Oh, you're good. We're just joking. It's all jokes here, folks.
Yeah, but and so
I've just a fucking peered.
Yeah, and so it's not.
I'm gonna put the little Fallout technical difficulties image on your screen while we're at it.
Yeah.
So that's good.
As long as the ink spots are playing over top of it, just like, hang on, I don't want to set the world on fire.
Yeah,
that was a 10 out of 10 impression. I love that.
We're not even to the worst part yet.
Oh, I love this. Keep it going. This is great.
And like, he hired the cheapest people to do this, and so like, there was tons of grave robbing going on. People were just like, they weren't taking notes. They were just basically digging holes, throwing bodies in caskets. In one of the reports, allegedly they had spoken to workers about, like, what do you do with the fresh bodies? And they're like, well, normally we just like cut them in half and throw them in 2 coffins. Yeah.
Sounds messy.
So within a week, this got, there was I think it was the Denver Republican was the news outlet. And so, like, everything I've set up here, completely true.
It's awesome.
Like, I haven't needed to exaggerate any of this. And so this was investigated and reported, like, this actually happened. And it was a huge scandal. The headline wrote, what is it? A work of ghouls was the actual headline that ran into in the newspaper.
Modern journalism, take note. Bring back headlines like that.
Yes.
I mean, listen, whatever the news may say, they say ghouls, but this man was a true capitalist.
Honestly, yeah. He was like, this
a
is
real American hero.
that was
Right. You said by the coffin. You didn't say the bodies had to be intact, sir.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, not all of them. He was paid by the coffin, and they found that not all of the coffins even had bodies in it. Some of them were just full of dirt.
I was gonna say, if you were paying me by the coffin and there was shoddy record keeping, I'd be like, and fraud time.
Like, this man was the Enron of the mid 1800s in Colorado. Just like he just made the numbers up. Like,
honestly, it would have been less terrible if he would have just made the numbers up.
It's almost like capitalism incentivizes this kind of behavior. Oh.
Yeah, weird. I know, right?
Right, we won't go down that tangent. I'm sorry. We won't jump down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast for another time.
Yes.
So,
but we do get rich stories out of it. So
it's true.
Yeah. So by the end of the, so by the time that all came to light, the government opened an investigation. They fired E.P. McGovern. And basically just kind of left everything as it was, like holes in the ground, bodies partially uncovered.
Wow.
Poor record keeping, nobody knowing exactly what was moved, what hasn't been moved, where are there still bodies. And so they put out another call for to the people, like, come out, bring out your dead.
Well, and basically, it sounds like they were like, well, that was a colossal failure. Mm-hmm. Let's try hiring someone else who maybe won't defraud us.
That would be that would be one way to do this, but of course, the city of Denver
was like, were they like, well, we tried.
Well, they did the most sensible thing that they could do. They just buried everything, leveled the ground.
You know, I have to go. I am on the city of Denver side of this because the alternative, like I have to describe the alternative, because the alternative is dig up whatever you could find, and then it's just like following IKEA instructions to reassemble your loved one. And then the worst part is like we've got two left legs over here left to, like, were these important? Did somebody I have to go with the city of Denver. I would legitimately level it and bring in one of each kind of mystic religion to, okay, all of you spread salt on the ground, chant, ring bells, and like everybody put some stuff to rest here. Like we're just going to do a big circle. We're going to hands across America this Rainbow Coalition, and we're just going to
move on.
We're going to sing Kumbaya, have a happy Chris Mahana Kwanzaa, and we're gonna like ashes, dust to dust. Let's move on with Denver.
Yeah. So city of Denver did the first half of that. They just said, you know what, fuck it, we're just gonna cut our losses and just level the ground, except for the Catholic portion of the cemetery, which they ended up selling off to the Archdiocese, which became Mount Cavalier Cemetery for a while. I might come back to that later, because that is that doesn't come around until the mid 1900s. So,
and this is why the Rockies have such a terrible record as a baseball team.
Yes, it's all an ancient curse.
It's all an ancient curse.
Yeah, and so, well, and like that was the way they made everybody happy. Rich people were happy. They now had Congress Park.
The subtlest of all park names. I love it.
Yeah, and so you have Millionaire's Row, that is a very high-end, very expensive neighborhood that is still around Cheesman Park and the Botanic Gardens.
Oh, okay.
It's still classical, like, houses, isn't it? Like, it's still like,
oh yeah,
because one of them is like you basically can get to from the Botanical Gardens, if I'm not wrong. It's
several of them you can. In fact, most of them you can. One of them is actually a part of the Botanic Gardens.
That's the one that I've seen, and then I remember seeing, like, oh, this is Millionaire's Row. Like, it's this really crazy, like they're beautiful houses.
Oh yeah,
Like
and
truly.
that's Millionaires from the early 1900s. So like
Mhm.
the equivalent of Billionaires now.
Wow. It's crazy how we're talking about stuff that's so far in the past, but like there's still echoes of it today.
Yeah.
Like that's wild.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, and like a
Wow.
couple of these.
Cue Europe just snooting into their snifters of various brandies.
Yeah.
Just poof.
And well,
Yeah.
I was going to come back to this later, but in the 1950s, like the botanical gardens, since we already brought that up, the Archdiocese of Denver decided that they were going to move the graveyard from the Mount Cavalier Cemetery to make room for the Denver Botanical Gardens.
Oh, so the Denver Botanical Gardens is built on the former Catholic section of that graveyard?
Yes, and in fact, a couple
Wow.
years ago, and back in 2010, when they were building the parking structure add-on for the Botanic Gardens, they ended up digging up more bodies.
Wow.
So even that section wasn't fully mapped out, and all those bodies didn't get moved.
That's wild.
And so there are literally thousands of bodies that are still buried there. Anywhere from I've seen estimates as high as 5,000. The usual number is around 2,000 bodies, but
It's a lot of
nobody
bodies.
knows because there weren't even records before the whole E.P. McGovern thing.
Wow.
Damn. I mean,
And so-
how lucky are those bodies that ended up underneath the bonsai tree part of the botanical gardens? They're just like, this is, you know what? I don't need to haunt anybody. This is just nice.
This is delightful.
This is quite delightful.
That's our next D&D game. It's going to be about a bunch of the people from the park having to go into the Zen thing, and they'd be like, help us free our souls and get into the Zen part of the haunting. That's a really half-baked campaign idea. Forget I said it. Move on. Sorry.
I don't know. Like I'm thinking about a campaign where just everybody's ghosts. I
think we need to pursue that in the future. That's actually there's something there. There's something there.
There's something there.
Write this down with a B. No, just
reverse Ghostbusters, which is technically the plot of Beetlejuice, if I'm not wrong. So
yeah, and I do have to clear up a misconception that I also had, because I had heard that on this land that was the cemetery there was where they had built the Denver was it the Denver Orphans Home that burned down at the around the 1900, killing a bunch of children.
Yeah,
that is not true. It was not built on the cemetery. The story about the orphans home burning down and killing children, absolutely true. Yeah. So and actually we already touched on Millionaire's Row, so that might be a good place just to go into of like some of the famous manors there. Like I had mentioned at the beginning.
Quick question for clarification though. So was Millionaire's Row, was that built on top of what was previously part of the graveyard?
Yes. So parts of it are.
Interesting.
So specifically,
there's an overlap, not the entire thing, but there's overlap.
Yeah, and it kind of depends, because Millionaire's Row, at least to my understanding, is more of a colloquial term used by Denverites more than like a set area. So there's not like it depends on where a lot of these things are a little bit loose in like what people are talking about. Like when you're talking,
it's not about, like, Millionaire's Row is at the boundary of 17th and Colorado Street. It's like it's a little more vague, but it's a general area. That makes sense.
And some of these people were clearly only thousandaires.
Which, hey, back then I wouldn't have said no to that.
I know, right? The other thing is like with there's not really good. Allegedly, there is a map somewhere that outlines where the cemetery was exactly, but I was trying to find exactly where everything was, and I cannot find the exact places where they were. And so I'm sure it exists, but it's not nowadays. It's not really easy to find like these set barriers of where the cemetery was. versus like where everything else is. There's kind of general areas, but a lot of part of the problem is that like a lot of the reporting is, even nowadays, they'll say like, oh, this place is at the corner of like this street and this street, and they're talking about like a park that might be one corner of it, but the park takes up an area, and like just trying to describe in words where everything is, it gets a little messy and it's a little hard to tell nowadays.
Well, the interesting thing about back then is like when it comes down to American history, like seriously, like you don't really like people don't really understand how wild the Wild West territories were before something became a state. Because when you became a state, you were codified. You actually had to have like a very set system of government. But territories were much more loosey goosey, and there was a reason that people got away with so much shit in territories, and it's because like there were like surveys were. I mean. Up until the Roosevelt administration, when he started creating all the three letter agencies, like there wasn't really a big unified like federal government, like a governing body for surveying or for like keeping track of things. Like this was legitimately local governments keeping track of whatever was around. And the interesting thing about that is you still get Colorado specifically. You get all these cities that still have these old west buildings, and they have very like you can go to Leadville, Colorado right now, and the main drag of Leadville
the mountains there are so beautiful with that old west Main Street. Wow,
it's so gorgeous. Oh, and I desperately want to go do a burro race out there and just run with a donkey. But like you can go to Leadville, and it looks basically like it would have when Oscar Wilde came and visited Leadville. Like it still looks like a mining town. It's a little plussed up. Like a couple of the building fronts are now ski shops, but like it's still a gorgeous city. It's got that old west vibe, and it's kind of that cool thing that I love about Western cities is you have just this outpouring of suburbia around like a core of what really used to be like this was all that civilization was, and this was a hub because the rail went through here or something to that effect. Like, and it's and there was damn near no law, and that just in general is a super cool. And so it would kind of make sense that like nobody had any survey of what this graveyard was, because everybody was trying to fucking figure out whose gold was whose. And like when you talk to one toothless prospector about the other toothless prospector about whose land is whose, and you find out they're the same fucking person running in through the left and right doors and just running around the house to come back and cheat you. You know, you at some point you go, all right, we need to come up with some fucking laws about this.
Yes. Infrastructure is important, organization is important, but no, that's fascinating to think about. Yeah, just how on the cusp of civilization it was, and how things like bureaucracy and organization and documentation just weren't on the radar in terms of being priorities.
Well, and on the cusp of expansion, which I go into other history nerd shit. Like, well, I'll save it for the next thing that I fucking research, because Will's done a really good job so far, and I'm derailing everything for the purpose of making the world's dumbest jokes.
No, it's fine, because actually that is a great explanation of how two Hungarian immigrants, one can kill the other, and they both get buried in the same grave.
Well, one of them was still alive.
Plot twist.
So, you killed your brother? Yep. All right, you in the hole too. No.
Honestly, like Old West justice could be a thing.
Could be a thing.
He was actually just thrown in there by a Striga, who was just like, you know what, fuck you.
But yeah, like, and we mentioned some of the houses in Millionaire's Row. There's and even now some of these are like famous houses. Like there's the Henry Treat Rogers Manor, which is what inspired the Changeling.
Okay.
The 1980s film that I had mentioned at the beginning of the show
with George C. Scott.
Yes,
I didn't realize he was still alive in the 80s.
You mean General
Patton.
Turgidson?
No, he played General Patton.
He was also General Turgidson in Doctor Strangelove.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that.
That's the main role I associate with George C. Scott outside of Patton, and it's because he was so mad that it was a comedy, because he considered himself a serious actor, and he is classically trained. He's very good in everything he does, but the fact that he is just so funny, like almost desperately trying to play it straight, and then but like there's definitely a point when he just like there was a point when Kubrick broke him, and then it was like comedy all day. And I love that movie so much.
It's a great movie.
It's my favorite satire.
My favorite Kubrick movie for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The other really famous manner there, just to hop back to the topic there.
No more Stanley Kubrick digressions.
Yeah,
we're done with Kubrick.
The Croke-Patterson Manor, which is now the Patterson Inn. It is a bed and breakfast. You can actually stay here.
Wow. I
hear it's very lovely. I have not been there, but
because it's haunted.
Yeah. So, the big thing is like it was made by what's his name? Something Croke. I don't remember the guy's actual name. Rich guy named Croke built the manor.
Did he croak and now haunts the place?
No, maybe, possible.
Maybe.
The one I believe Patterson is the one that is said to haunt the Croke-Patterson Manor, as well as a little girl who's been seen there.
Wow.
But so the story is that Croke built the manor, and he stayed there one night, and whatever happened disturbed him so thoroughly that he never stepped foot back into the building.
Wow. After spending all that money to build it, that's fascinating.
It was later purchased by the Pattersons, who, I'm trying to remember exactly what happened, but if I recall it, the whole family died eventually. Not natural causes. If memory serves, I might also be confusing that with another manor there, but
another manor where the family all died under mysterious circumstances.
There's a lot of those. There is a shocking number of homes, mansions in the area of Congress Park and Capitol Hill that story describes.
That's an interesting statistic.
Okay.
Yeah, but so just some of the weird stuff that happened there is there was in the 1970s they started renovating the Croke-Patterson Manor.
In the 70s, 1970s.
1970s.
Okay.
Like it passed around to a few different people. In the 1970s, it was getting renovated. While it was renovated,
shag carpeting, dull orange wallpaper, popcorn ceilings. They're like truly an indoor pool, truly renovated in the style of the 70s.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And when the so the construction team that was there, like,
did they find something creepy?
Well, so the tools started moving around, going missing. They found that like jobs that they had done the previous day, they would come in and the jobs would be basically just undone.
Wow.
And so they decided, okay, this is probably like teenagers fucking with a construction site.
Mm-hmm.
And so they started locking doors, making it difficult to get in. They brought in guard dogs, 2 Doberman Pinschers. As the story goes, at least, that it was 2 Doberman Pinschers. I don't know why that fact is relevant, but it was reported at least. And so, like, not fuck around dogs, like honest guard dogs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the guard dogs were apparently something happened that either scared or enticed them so thoroughly that they jumped out of the third-story window to their deaths.
Really?
Yes.
Dog suicide house. That is heartbreaking.
That's low even for a ghost. Come on. I mean, burn some kids alive, have someone do... Yeah, that's fine. But dogs, you don't mess with the pets, man. Come on.
I've seen The Conjuring. This is a demon.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And they later would do a seance. Allegedly, from the seance, they had heard that there was a little girl haunting who claimed to be buried in the basement.
Wow.
So they did excavate the basement. They did find a hidden room that was full of sea sand. They never found any remains of a little girl, though.
Sea sand, though? What do you mean by that?
Like beach, like sand from the sea, not Denver.
Not Denver.
Not the type of earth that you would normally find in the area.
Intriguing.
Yeah, and it was a little hidden room that was sealed off. So that's just bizarre.
That is bizarre.
Yeah, and like people have reported seeing several different ghosts there. It is a very, I've been by there. It is a beautiful building, and if you're interested, it is now a bed and breakfast, so you can now go and spend the night there if you're coming to Colorado and want to do a ghost tour.
I wonder if there's a ghost in my room right now because my ring light is doing this, and I'm not touching my desk at all. Here, look. It's just shaking.
Oof. I mean, all right, we might be getting some reactions.
Yeah.
Down in the Springs.
Creepy.
It's shaking your life because it's like finally somebody believes in ghosts who's not gonna fucking scream that they can fix me in front of a mega church. Like, oh.
No, I've never had the ring light shake like this. I've had it set up on my desk for like weeks.
But but other weird things like your light shaking or the ghosts that are reported in the Croak Patterson manner. There is the famous ones. There's a woman in white who's said to walk around Cheesman Park at night. There's children that are seen to be playing there in the night that if you approach them, they just vanish. If you lay down in certain spots on the park, you will feel somebody holding you, grabbing you and holding you down.
Well, that sounds similar to what you described of, I mean, the disappearing kids, or the feeling of grabbing in your story, in your experience with Cheesman Park.
Yeah.
Got goosebumps.
And then if you go to the park at certain times, either in the early morning or late evening, when the light is just catching right, you can see, allegedly, where some of the graves are.
Really?
Yeah.
I like that. Whether it's an optical illusion or not, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, and legitimately, there are still bodies there. There are reports of people taking their dog to the park and the dog digging up a freaking tibia.
Whoa.
The University of Denver has used Cheesman Park to do ground penetrating radar tests on multiple occasions. And so it is legitimately a weird place, and there are just so many different stories of people having their own experiences there.
Wow.
Hell yes.
And so Cheesman Park is just one part of it's separate. It got separated from what is now called Congress Park. Congress Park was originally incorporated that and a little more space there, but those are kind of the highlights there. Questions?
That's fantastic.
I think that's cool as hell, and I think I legitimately no further questions, Your Honor. That is cool.
Perfect. No notes.
Fucking no notes. Great story. I got some dumb jokes in. Hell yeah, that was cool. I dig it. I learned something today.
Yeah, we learned history. We had some good laughs. We got a couple shots into the Catholic Church. I think today's a win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, and it is interesting because, like, both of you are Coloradans, but neither of you are from Denver.
Correct.
And so, like, I don't know if it's just a Denver thing to, like, know Cheesman Park is a creepy ass place. But, well, and not everybody even finds it creepy. It's just, it is, the whole Cap Hill is just an area of high strangeness. And so,
interesting.
There are, like, rumors of, like, if you're parked in certain areas, you'll hear tapping on your glass.
Wow.
There's lots of people who reported having lived there or around it that have just seen strange things. Me, as we said in our podcast and whatever corner it is, having my being assaulted by ghosts. It sounds much worse when I say it like that.
Or they were trying to beckon you for help from something even scarier.
Yeah, or they needed my help, and I just fucking left children there to.
And then you went through a wormhole and ended up where you started. That's the craziest part to me.
It was a bunch of kids that were all just trying to ride the pegs on your bike,
Yeah.
and as it usually goes, they just fell off.
Yeah, as it turns out, Will is just a dick to children.
Only dead children.
And now we know.
Yes, definitely only a dick to dead children.
You're politely apathetic to living children.
That's entirely fair.
Oh, well, Will, thank you for doing all that research, man. We learned a ton, and that's crazy that this goes back like 200 years almost. That's wild. Wow.
And who would have guessed that a whole lot of strangeness started by the U.S. government being a dick to natives?
I mean, strangeness is going to come from somewhere. That's first place I'd look.
Yeah, never heard that story before.
It's like, well, who'd the old racists piss off? Well, that's there's your problem.
Yep. Well, guys, this has been an awesome Nerds and Friends exclusive. I look forward to what we should do for our next. We should take turns, each of us, researching something and presenting it to the group. And to everyone watching, let us know in the comments what you'd like us to research and discuss in the future.
Yeah. What did I get completely wrong? Let us know in the comments.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very down with deep dives.
Yes.
Always a fun thing.
Yeah, that's going to be one of our new recurring series. We have movie reviews, we have our standard podcast with guests, and now we're going to have deep dives. Will be the new thing. This has been a delightful time, guys. This has been awesome.
Absolutely. All right, thanks for having me on, guys.
Of course. Thank you, Will, for the research. This has been a Nerds and Friends deep dive. That's our new branding.